Resistance has long been one of PlayStation's flagship franchises, so it was a bit of a no-brainer that it would find a home on the Vita, which was one of the first handhelds to offer console-quality first-person shooters on the go. Known as Burning Skies, is set out to fill in the gaps between the first and second game in the series and throws you into the role of Tom, a firefighter who's caught in the middle of the Chimeran invasion as he fights his way out of his hometown in the hopes of reuniting with his family. It's a bit of a departure from the previous characters that the game's introduced, and as a result the story is a much more personal affair. It's nothing that's going to win any awards, but the different take does provide a new perspective on how the invasion affected everyday people. Now in terms of gameplay, Burning Skies takes full advantage of everything that the Vita has to offer, may that be its touchscreen, rear trackpad or dual analog setup, which all work in tandem to deliver an unforgettable experience on the handheld. As with most first-person shooters, you'll get to wield a whole suite of different weapons, with 8 in total being available throughout the campaign, with many of the classic guns returning, like the Bullseye, Carbine, Ager, as well as a couple of new options like the Crossbow Shotgun, which all come along with secondary functions like being able to tag an enemy and shoot at them around corners that can all be upgraded throughout the course of the game. As the first FPS to hit the handheld, Burning Skies proved that the Vita was more than up to the challenge when it came to delivering on the console's promise of being able to provide near AAA experiences in the palm of your hands. Sure, it's not perfect, but it's still a pretty decent shooter, and if you're a fan of the franchise, you owe it to yourself to give it a go. Shinobido has been around since the days of the PlayStation 2, and Revenge of Zen on the Vita is the sequel to the PSP game that released in 2007. Developed by Acquire, the same minds behind the first Tenchu game, it's clear to see the parallels between the two series, with its huge focus on stealth as well as action-based gameplay that comes together to result in one of the best ninja games you can find. Set 6 months after the first outing, it all takes place in the once peaceful region of Utakata. It's your job as Zen to take on missions from one of the various warlords throughout the land that see you having to take down targets, free prisoners or transport documents that all work towards leveling up and improving your character. What makes it a bit different though is that for every mission you complete, it'll have an impact on the ones you take on in the future. For example, completing a few quests that harm a given group's food supply will hurt the morale and mindset of their troops, which will in turn make them more likely to fall for traps like poison food, which ends up making the side quests just as important as the main story. As you would expect, you've got a wide range of tools at your disposal, from throwing knives to traps and of course your trusty katana, but scattered throughout each level are resources that can be gathered to craft even more options, allowing you to come up with new strategies to deal with the enemy. Although it's not perfect, Shinobido 2 delivers a comparable experience to the likes of Tenchu, and with its addictive leveling up system, you'll find yourself always wanting to jump back in for more. So if you're looking for some stealth action to take with you on the go, Shinobido 2 is well worth checking out. The best way to describe Army Corps would be that it's a metal version of Pikmin that sees you taking on the mantle of the King of Hell as you command an army of monsters that are all too eager to do your bidding. You're presented with various levels that are occupied by angry beasts, and you've got to clear each one of them and open up the path forward to continue. At any one time, up to 100 monsters can be under your command, and they're all broken up into one of 3 different classes that excel depending on the situation. You've got the soldiers whose raw strength and defensive protection make them perfect for up-close combat, the spearmen who are also pretty handy up close but are best used for charging at the enemy, and finally the magi with their long-ranged magic-based attacks that provide the perfect cover and support for your army. Because of these differences, there's a lot of strategy involved in taking on each enemy, and sometimes you've got other factors to deal with, such as some of the beasts only being vulnerable from the back, or they may be covered in flames or electricity that see you having to utilize your magic before charging in. Aside from the combat, crafting ends up being a big part of the game as well, and after you've slain a monster, their organs can be harvested to create more powerful weapons and tools for your army to wield. But failing in the game will see all of these improvements being lost, which really adds to the intensity of each fight as the stakes are really high. With its gut-wrenching gore, head-banging soundtrack and intense gameplay, Army Corps is a truly entertaining journey through the depths of hell. Murasaki Baby has to be one of the strangest games that ever released for the PlayStation Vita. May that be because of its simplistic gameplay or its Tim Burton inspired visuals, and it ends up being quite a disturbing experience that sees you taking control of a girl as you guide her by holding her hand across a range of different levels. It's not as easy as it sounds guiding her though, as if you pull too hard she'll let go and fall to the ground crying, so you've got to find that happy medium between being gentle and not too rough. The game works a lot like a puzzle platformer, and you'll have to use both the front and rear touchpads to get through it, with the front giving you a means to not only point her in the right direction, but also look after her heart, which represents her life. At moments you'll have to lift it above danger or chase it down should an enemy take it away, and throughout the game you'll also have to manipulate the environment. May that be moving platforms with the touchscreen or using the backpad to cycle through different backdrops that result in different effects. For example, the red environment will cause Jack-in-the-Boxes to pop up in the background, scaring away everything trying to harm the baby. A blue background on the other hand creates rain, which fills up any gaps in the ground and allows the baby to jump on a little raft, and then flipping the background orange allows the player to create gusts of wind, which propels the baby across the bodies of water. This results in some really cool creative puzzles throughout the game, but there's never a moment where it becomes too taxing, and once you've figured out the basics it's all pretty straightforward. It all ends up being a dark but beautiful adventure with a somewhat harrowing message that'll no doubt stick with you long after the credits have rolled. Killzone Mercenary is by far one of the best first-person shooters ever designed for a handheld system, and much like the name implies, this time around you take up the fight as a mercenary, with each of the missions taking the form of contracts. These missions can be played on one of 3 different difficulties, and after completing it, it unlocks even more contracts based around the level, may that be for stealth, demolition or efficiency, which each bring different objectives that need to be checked off. For instance, a stealth contract might require you to kill a specific number of enemies with a suppressed weapon, whereas an efficiency contract might make you complete the mission within a specific time frame or get a certain number of headshots. Now, currency is at the core of everything you'll be doing, from completing missions to scoring headshots or takedowns, which all feed into the economy system that serves up new weapons, upgrades and equipment that ensures that you're always unlocking new items to expand your field of options. For example, different types of armor can be used to match your playstyle, from silent and swift to loud and heavy, and then there's the Vanguards, this game's versions of kill streaks that reward you with special abilities upon reaching a certain amount of kills. From remote controlled drones to missile strikes and invisibility, there's a lot to play around with, and just like most first party Vita games, Mercenary takes full advantage of each of the unique inputs the system brings to the table, most notably the touchscreen that comes into play when performing melee attacks, with the action slowing down and you're given different directions to swipe on the screen, which surprisingly makes the action of sneaking up on enemies and taking them down even more satisfying. In the end, Mercenary definitely lives up to the series name. It looks and plays great and has got plenty of content that'll keep you coming back for more. The PlayStation Vita received its fair share of rhythm games, but one that doesn't get talked about too often has to be IAVT, and the fact that it never released outside of Japan no doubt contributed to its obscurity, but it's without a doubt one of the best of its kind on the console. On the surface, the gameplay is simple, and you've got to hit one of the face buttons that show up on a line as they reach a circle, but it soon descends into absolute mayhem as you work your way through the levels, with not only the music ramping up in its intensity, but the button prompts as well. The main objective is of course to score as many points as you can, and this is where the multiplier system comes into play. Depending on how accurate you are, each hit will result in one of 4 different grades, either cool, fine, safe or miss, and by keeping it on cool, you'll slowly multiply your score, allowing you to reach a higher amount of points and be rewarded with a better grade at the end of each level. With 3 different difficulties and a grade system that ranks from F to SS, there's plenty of replay value packed in, and that's not even mentioning the different modes that you can get stuck into as well, the best being the challenge mode that sets certain parameters for the player to achieve, such as scoring over 200 cools with increased speed or not missing one hit throughout a randomized level. You've also got free play that does exactly what it says on the tin and allows you to play any of the unlocked songs you've earned throughout the campaign, and it's the perfect way to master each of them if you're looking to earn everything that the game has to offer. When it comes down to it, IAVT is a fantastic music game, and thankfully you don't need to understand Japanese in order to play it, as most of it is presented in English, so if you're up to the challenge, it's well worth picking up. Extreme vs. Force is a truly addictive action game that will no doubt appeal to fans of the show as well as those of you who are looking for a challenge. Offering more than 130 different mechs, all with multiple weapons, optional equipment, and nigh on infinitely customizable stats, it provides an unprecedented degree of freedom to the player. Gameplay is simple and very intuitive, and mainly revolves around dashing about each map and confronting the enemy forces that reside there. As I've mentioned, the range of weapons is huge, from long-range guns to missiles and light swords. You're equipped for any situation that might pop up, and with the fluid controls allowing you to make your way around with ease, it soon becomes an absolute dream to play. Each mech has a lot of different ways to attack, either with one of its main weapons, a secondary weapon or ability, a charged attack, or an impressive special move. Most of the different attacks could be a lot of fun to play with, but unfortunately the melee assaults are rather underwhelming if I'm being honest. As you complete missions, you'll gain experience points that allow you to upgrade your mech and alter its appearance and skills to keep you on a level playing field throughout the various missions. But it's not all just about mindlessly attacking enemies, as many of these missions require you to complete different objectives as well. From collecting specific items to escorting valuable targets, the game constantly comes up with new things for you to do, which really helps it from becoming stale. For Gundam fans, this one's a done deal, but for those of you who may not know the series or have no interest in it at all, Extreme vs. Force still offers enough that will satisfy casual fans of action combat. The Lumines games on the PSP were renowned as some of the console's finest puzzlers, and the Vita version would carry on this tradition by offering up a far more refined experience that took everything that came before it and fine-tuned it into one of the best versions in the series. At first glance it looks a lot like Tetris, but your goal is to rotate falling squares comprised of 4 small blocks, so that squares of the same colour join to form squares measuring at least 2 by 2. You use the D-pad to move them and then the face buttons to manipulate their position, but the blocks don't disappear straight away like they do in Tetris, and instead a vertical line that constantly sweeps across the screen is what makes them form into shapes and removes them from the pile. It's vital to pay attention to this line because as it moves it changes the landscape of the playing field that you're dropping squares onto, and if you mistime a drop by even a fraction of a second, you'll likely end up with a pile of mismatched squares instead of points. What helps shake it up is the different types of blocks that fall. You've got the chain block that causes all squares of the same colour to disappear, as well as shuffle blocks that randomize the color of any square they touch. On top of this, by tapping the screen you can perform one of several special abilities that recharge slowly over time, such as summoning more chain blocks, slowing down the speed at which new squares appear, and even pausing the timeline for a brief moment. The only downside to the game is that it's over far too soon, and when compared to the originals there's a lot less content to make your way through. It's a bit of a shame as the improved mechanics and tighter gameplay make it the best in the series to play, but it would have been even better with more to do. Soul Sacrifice is an action RPG that shares a lot in common with the likes of Monster Hunter and sees you fighting grotesque enemies as you take up the mantle of a sorcerer. For those of you that played the original, Delta is an updated version that added in new story elements, as well as many tweaks to the gameplay that ultimately makes it the best way to experience the game. At the center of it all is the concept of sacrifice, which becomes apparent at the moment you defeat your first enemy. Here you're presented with 3 different options, that being save, sacrifice or fate, which all have different effects in battle and will encourage the player to experiment with all 3. Your defense and the quantity of health you regain from healing increases as you gain life levels if you choose to save more often, but if you sacrifice enough you gain magic levels, which adds to your attack and amount of spells that you can use, and finally if you leave them up to fate you're rewarded with an equal amount of the 2. This mechanic allows you to tailor your character to your liking and opens up many different ways to engage in combat. A big difference from similar games is the complete lack of armor, which usually stands in as a way to increase your effectiveness in the world, and instead Soul Sacrifice uses something known as sigils that further alter your abilities, which are earned by collecting different types of essence. Each enemy will drop a different type, with some increasing your defense or attack, and finding some of the best options takes a lot of work, but it's really rewarding by making each battle all the more manageable with them equipped. With its near endless amount of customization, simple but deep combat mechanics and engrossing story, Soul Sacrifice Delta is for sure one of the best action RPGs that the Vita ever received. When Golden Abyss was first revealed, it was pretty damn impressive to see it up and running on a handheld system, but I was skeptical about how it would actually turn out when compared to its counterparts on the PlayStation 3. Upon its release, all those doubts quickly disappeared as the game retained nearly every aspect of the series, with its story focusing on hunting down a mysterious lost city as you shoot, climb and vault through chapter after chapter and visit many exotic locations that all help the adventure stay true to the previous entries in the series. One of my main concerns was how the gameplay would translate to the portable system, and even though there are only 2 shoulder buttons instead of 4, this is where the touchscreen does a great job of filling in for the missing inputs. Grenades, for example, see you having to drag the icon from the corner of the screen to where you'd like to throw it, which ends up feeling quite intuitive, as well as other uses for the touchscreen seeing you having to chop through foliage that blocks off different areas. Now, the gunplay itself is easily the best part of the gameplay, and for fans of the originals, you'll instantly be able to get into the groove with all of your weapons being mapped to the D-pad, allowing you to quickly switch through them on the fly. The second analog stick allows you to aim with precision, as well as having the option to use the gyroscope built into the Vita, which ends up feeling really natural. The main standout though has to be the visuals that are nearly on par with the first game and still look incredible considering the console's limitations. From beautiful vistas to the heart-pounding gunfights, it's a game that plays just as good as it looks. Well, that does it for another video. Keep an eye out for the next part as that will be coming up soon, so don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell to get notified about new videos. You can follow me on all of the socials which are linked below to stay up to date, and also join my growing community on Discord to meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Shuden, Richard, Amy, Daniel, Dio, Omar, Strider, Pierre, Carl, Awesome Jacket Dude, Maximus, Scott, Alfred, Terry, Ryan, Alex, GameCube Galaxy, Curse Salaryman, Fake and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining the Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find all of these links down below. As always, thanks for taking the time to check the video out. I'll catch you next time.